recording right now. So welcome everyone to Coaching Agile Journeys. I would love to know if this is your first time here and how you found us. If it is your first time, welcome. We try to be a really engaging online virtual meetup. We're almost 4 years strong right now. And we have a lot of co-hosts, and so if you're co-hosts, raise your hand. Not all of us are on the call today, but we became passionate about sharing knowledge to continue learning, growing, and helping others on their Agile journey. And so for the past almost 4 years, we've been finding topics that help guide others in their development in their Agile journeys. And over this time, we've added on lots of different events. So now we have a Lean Coffee event. We still have our monthly speaker. We partnered with Open Leadership Network. So you'll see us talk about Open Leadership Network, and you can go to the site. I'll be pasting it in the chat in just a little bit. And so we do all this in our own passion, on our own time and our own money. And so if we've made a difference in your life, we'd love to hear. Paste in the chat, tweet, buy us some coffee by going to our website and donating a little bit to our cause so that we can keep these events going. And so today we've got Daryl. Daryl is working with Accenture, and he's going to talk about the politics of business agility. And when I saw this topic, I was like, whoa, this is a topic that probably resonates with a lot of people here. And having taken a peek at his slides, I'm just so excited to see how this unfolds. And so, Daryl, I just want to welcome you. Thank you so much for taking the time to present to us today and share your knowledge. And we're just excited that you're here.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity. And so you've made a difference in my life just by letting me present here. And let me know about the connection. Am I coming through okay? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm in my car. No, I'm not driving. This is sometimes my best phone booth. Our open workspace at work and my home life. Sometimes it's just better to do things like this in my car. So hopefully our connection is good, and just let me know or let Heidi know if we've got any problems. Okay, so a bit of introduction for myself. Let's see. My name is Daryl Kulak. Is my Twitter handle. I work at Accenture as a result of an acquisition a few years ago. It was Pillar Technology, and Accenture bought us as part of their Industry X.0 business unit. And so what I can say is I'm still here. So Accenture has actually been treating us pretty well. And they are taking the essence of that company and letting us be who we are. And so it's been actually pretty exciting to be part of this this massive company. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. That's where I've lived for the last 20 years. I've done a lot of traveling. And before that, I actually grew up in Canada, in Edmonton, Alberta. And then have kind of lived in a lot of different places since then. I've been involved with a number of enterprise transformations. I think the count is around 13 by this time. And that led to the creation of this book in 2017 with my co-author, Dr. Hong Lee. The two of us looked at the work that we had been doing with enterprise transformation, and we looked at the books that were available and even the frameworks that were emerging, like SAFe, like Nexus, Grows, Less, Modern Agile, all of these. And we wrote this book for three reasons. One is that we felt like there was an overemphasis on best practices and people saying, just tell me what to do, and that there was a lot more to getting business value out of this transformation than what people were talking about, doing Agile, being Agile, all of this stuff. There was a lot more to it. And what we found is that the world of systems thinking, in the subtitle there, the world of systems thinking gave us some of the additional foundation that would help us go after some of the issues that we saw. And the third thing was when we're looking at these frameworks like GROWS and Nexus and SAFE, we saw that they portrayed what we called the city on the hill. So they had this beautiful shining city that that showed kind of the world as we'd all like it to be, but they didn't talk much about the journey. And in fact, when we did a video ad for this book, we did this little thing, which I thought you'd get a kick out of. So the beautiful shining city on the hill. Okay, so that's the Scaled Agile framework there in the background, that nice castle in red. On the you've got, let's see, I have to run it again. So these little spikes here, I believe that is command and control leadership. The little fire hydrants here that shoot fire, maybe that's your corporate methodology. I got to keep this running. These big blades going back and forth, so that's standards of professionalism. The annual budget cycle is probably the big dragon back there. So all of these things keep us from being able to achieve business value and to get to that end framework. And so what we found is the framework at the end, how beautiful the castle was less important to us day to day than getting past all of these things in the journey. And so that was the reason we named the book with the Journey to Enterprise Agility. And so today we don't have a whole lot of time, but just this hour, but I want to teach you one of those tools that comes from the systems thinking world that might be useful for you as you are dealing with these problems. And I think, like this Coaching Agile Journeys, I think all of you are involved in some type of transformation work, and all of you are kind of probably dealing with these things every day. Whoops, here it goes again. Let me out of this. I'm stuck in a nightmare. Okay, not that Accenture's a nightmare. Accenture, what is Accenture? Accenture is a global consulting firm, 500,000 plus employees around the world. And a lot of people think of Accenture as SAP implementations, which they were for many, many years, but they are really, truly moving away from that because everybody has SAP, and towards digital product delivery and transformation. And so this Industry X.0, or I don't know if the name's going to be changed or whatever, but right now that is the group that is part of what is becoming the new Accenture within the old Accenture. So it's pretty exciting. Okay, so I'm going to talk about two words here: politics and culture. And I know I don't have to worry about the chat room, but I'm just going to take a quick look. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Oh, what is SAP? SAP is a enterprise resource planning software. It costs usually, the license for the software usually costs in the millions of dollars, and the implementation of SAP is usually in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And so for Accenture, it was a great business to be in doing this year after year. But now everyone has that software to do their kind of end-to-end resource planning, and they are able to move on to other things. Okay, so let's define these two terms, politics and culture, because that's really what today's session is about. So politics is the interpersonal relationships with regard to the distribution and usage of power. And Heidi has also put these into the chat room. So we talk about politics. I'm not talking about political primaries or presidential or anything like that. This is office politics. And it's what we have to deal with every day. And it's part of what makes that nightmare, scenario that we showed before so difficult. And the second is culture. You may have heard the term culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if that's true, why do we spend so much time on strategy and practices and principles, and why don't we think more about culture? So culture is the values, norms, and behaviors that contribute to the social and psychological environment of a workplace. And I think culture can stop a transformation dead in its tracks if we are not adapting the way that we're coaching and the way that we're transforming to the culture that exists. So those are a couple of definitions. Okay, so let's get the chat room geared up here. I'd like you to just pick an organization in your mind and describe their tech stack, like whatever words that you'd use. Take that organization and then just describe their tech stack. LAMP is good. Yep. Linux, I forget what the A stands for. 20-year vintage. That can be a good description of a tech stack or as well as a wine. So there you go. Legacy, Salesforce, SAP would work, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
A2EE and microservices. Yeah, so I think we have very good, Azure. So you've got the Microsoft stack. Brittle, that's a characteristic of the stack. So I think we have lots of terms that we can use to describe a tech stack for an organization. Now let's take that same organization and describe the culture. So let's go again.
It's a lot easier to describe the tech stack, I think.
Isn't it? Fear-based. Collaborative, non-political, siloed, learning, command and control, top-down. Holy cow. Weird mix. That can apply to the tech stack too. Risk intolerant, choke points, hospitable. Yeah, so when I do this talk, hierarchical, non-sharing, ambiguous communication, deadline driven, that's good. Manage and make decisions. So what I find is it's a lot easier for all of us to describe a tech stack than a culture. And so if here are some of the things that come up. So we have an open culture, we have a family-oriented culture. I think somebody said command and control, bureaucratic. So although our tech stack descriptions were very specific, our cultural descriptions, I would say, are not. I would say they're quite general, and they could be subject to a lot of interpretation. And you might think, well, that's just the nature of culture, but I want to convince you that that's not really the case. That we could actually be a little bit more specific about culture, and if culture is so important, maybe we should be taking a better look at it. So when we think about why do projects fail, and we won't use the chat room for this one, but if you just think about project failures that you've experienced and that you've been in the team or you've seen teams where this happens, what has occurred? And if we look at, like computer headlines, some recent headlines here from Computer Weekly, cultural resistance is the main cause of BPM failure, business process modeling. So business process modeling is like this complex thing where we, model business process of organization, but the complexity of the method, the complexity of the tools, usually not the problem. The problem is the culture that we're going up against. In big data, the big data failures can be attributed more to business culture than technology. DevOps represents a considerable cultural shock. So time and time again, we run up against these cultural issues. And wouldn't it be good if we had some frameworks to deal with this and a way to kind of think about culture, to analyze it, talk about it with each other. And so I just, as our first part here, I just want to give you some frameworks here to talk about this. So I think, you know, all of us are familiar with the pieces of an agile transformation. We've got team room practices where we've got talk about sprints, we talk about definition of done, user stories. It comes, you know, a lot of this comes from Scrum, but you know, we probably need to add more to it than just what Scrum gives us. Then we've got engineering practices. So we talk about test-driven development, pair programming, the solid principles. But so we talk about here software craftsmanship, but it's also, we need probably more than what software craftsmanship gives us. Then we use what we call value practices, value stories, thin slicing, boundary critique, MVP, stuff like that. And so this is like the Eric Ries and the lean startup, but again, we need to add more than what he's given us. And then finally, what I call enterprise scalability, program metrics, budgeting and contracting, performance appraisals. And I think SAFe and the other frameworks have some of this embedded in them, but they're also, there's a lot we need to add to that. So if you look at this as the world of maybe agile coaching for you, I want to add something to that world. And so if you think of those 4 boxes as the right practices, and I'm going to borrow a bit from Buddhism here. So in Buddhism, they have something that's called right action. It's kind of like the definition of living a good life. And one thing is that you do the right thing. So that's an important thing. Great, let's do the right thing. But it's not the only part of it. They also talk about, in Buddhism, they also talk about right speech. So I'm saying the right things. Not only important to do the right things, but say the right things. They also have something called right intention. So if you're just doing all the right things and saying all the right things, it's still not enough. And if you look at the kind of the foundation here, I think if you have the right intention, it supports the right speech and the right practices. And then finally, the right worldview. So all of these together are part of the noble path in Buddhism, and I find them very useful, and we use them in our book to show that there's more to all of this, you know, agile transformation than just doing the right thing. Best practices, I guess you could say. And so for us, for today, we're going to look at the bottom 3 of pieces here and call that culture. And I'm going to stop right here. If people have any questions, do we have anything in the chat room needs to be addressed?
There are no questions in the chat room yet.
Well, Lisa loves this, so you could have mentioned that to me.
That was a given.
Yes, of course, yes. I like this focus on the right speech, right intention, and right worldview, because we say that culture is what you reward, tolerate, and those day-to-day interactions.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
One more thing I do have, there is a question here that says, are there any other words for worldview for a better understanding?
Yeah, that's really good. So worldview, in Buddhism, they just say right view, but we added worldview, and it actually connects to the systems thinking world quite nicely. So if you think of a person's worldview as the entirety of all the experiences that person has had up to that point in their life, and then the view that they have of the world based on all those experiences. So let's say that I've had a very, very difficult life and all these different things have happened to me. And so my worldview has become, because of those experiences, but also because of how I handle those experiences, my worldview has become, it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. And you know, you have to get the other guy before he gets you. Okay, that's a worldview. And it's not going to be a very helpful worldview in terms of being in a workplace or in terms of transformation. And so a person can have a worldview, but then there can also be kind of a prevalent worldview in an organization. And so we find this sometimes. We've done some transformations with startups, and the startup maybe has like 2 or 3 successful products, and so they kind of feel like, you know, and they're really on the upswing, and so they kind of feel like, you know, we're perfect, like we know everything now, and that worldview can keep them from getting to the next level, because they've assumed that with, let's face it, some luck, they had some good products that meant marketplace success, that they might actually fail to make to the next level unless they can change worldview for themselves. So that's what's meant by worldview. It's a very, very good question.
Thank you. Just one more. Could you think of worldview as a mindset?
I think that's an okay synonym for it. There's quite a bit going on in our field about like agile mindset, and I'm hesitant to use that term because that term kind of already has a definition from some other authors, and I feel like as agile mindset has become in our agile community, it's still a little bit too much about practices. So I'd like to back off from that and use that term worldview instead.
Thank you. I have one more question if you still have a time to do it,
Yes,
to address
sure.
it. So Skip is asking, the word right is relative to some standard, whether tele or ontological or no. Would that be relative to the org culture in this context?
Let me get that one more time.
Right is relative to some standard, right? And Skip is asking whether tele or ontological or no. Would that be relative to the org culture? So I guess he's comparing. Skip, if you want to unmute, if you can or able, and you want to ask that question.
When we say right speech, right intention, right relative to, what's the context for that?
Well, and again, we're borrowing this from Buddhism. So in Buddhism, this would be more about the teleological, because they're kind of like trying to be right with the universe. And in Buddhism, there is guidance as to what is right. I think the way that we're trying to use it is it's right for the circumstances. So as an agile coach, if I'm in a company that a particular set of circumstances, there is a right way for me to coach them and a wrong way. And if I'm too dogmatic about the way that I go about this, then you know, you could say that's the wrong way to do it. Yeah. So there's some, it's a value laden word that saying the right practices, the right speech, but we decided to keep that from Buddhism, and then kind of make it more about right in the circumstances versus kind of saying that there is something that's right no matter what, if that helps.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment and see if this resonates and is in agreement with your idea, Daryl. Is that okay?
Yes.
What I like about this is the idea of the alignment between all of these, the worldview, intentions, speech, and practices. And what I see sometimes is people have the right intention and the wrong speech, or even in some cases, in the case of leadership, they have the wrong intention and they have the right speech, but people are reading into their intention, not their speech. And what really resonates with me in this model is that idea of alignment between all of these.
Yeah, yeah. And that one is easier to fix than the other. So if I have the right intention but the wrong speech, the speech is a little bit easier to fix. If I have the wrong intention and the right speech, now you're kind of dealing with it almost feels like deception. Yeah. Good, very good. Okay,
Thank you.
we'll keep moving. So culture. So culture is important. Okay, Daryl, let it go. What can we do about it? So what I'd like to do is introduce you to some cultural dimensions, and I'll give credit here at the end of it because it's not mine, but we talk about this in our book as well. So what if we were able to talk about culture in terms of certain dimensions? So for instance, individualism versus collectivism. If you look at countries, you could say that the US has more of a focus on individual freedom, individual liberty, whereas a country like China is more about what's best for the collective. And you will see this in organizations as well. So sometimes when we work with just car companies, we find that the collectivism of the culture can actually change. And then when we have companies that are based more on individualism, they're able to make decisions faster because it's just one person saying my way or the highway. But but then there are also some downsides to that. And so in these dimensions, and if you think of these like sliders, individualism at one end and collectivism at the other, and everybody's in somewhere in between, it's not that there's a good side of the slider and the bad side of the slider, but it's just good to know, and it's a good vocabulary for people like us to have to talk about, you know, what is the uncertainty avoidance here? What is the power distance? So here, a power distance, and again, we have country names here, but it's not meant to generalize that everybody in that country. It's just that generally, where are these countries? So power distance, how comfortable is the society with differences in equality, influence, and wealth, status consciousness? Boy, this is a big one for companies. So it's how important is it that I do exactly what my boss tells me, and how much can I deviate from this, or how much can I change my approach to be different than what my boss has told me. Uncertainty avoidance, so that's some explanation there right in the term. Time orientation, is it okay to be late to meetings, or is it just everything's kind of fluid? Direct versus indirect communication. Neutral versus effective, so it's okay to show your emotions or it's not. And tight versus loose, so social norms are it's very important to constrict yourself to those social norms, or we can be loosey-goosey with them. So I just want to leave you with this framework, and of course give attribution here to the Cultural Intelligence Center, culturalq.com. So they've created this. It's not really this this framework is not completely apparent on their website, but David Livermore, who is the leader of this group, he's written several books, and he's also got in the teaching company, he's also got a really good audio that's available that goes into some of the details of that framework. But this group is not about agile transformation. This group is about helping business people who travel around the world figure out the different cultures that they're dealing with, and then how they can do business in those areas. So it's quite interesting, but it's very, very applicable from what we found to use this same thing with our transformation work. Okay, so now in the chat room, let's pick a political problem that you've encountered, and we can use these to talk about what we're doing next.
I mean, in our political problem at work?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not country politics. We can't deal with that here.
There's so much to pick from, though.
Information hiding. Okay, that's a good one. Oh, wow. Lots of them. People unable to speak up to a very command and control leader. Good. Leadership-driven product transformation. Reorgs. Selective information sharing. I do not have the power to do that. Leadership says they want a team to be autonomous, but not actually telling them. Different in intention than speech, right? Learned helplessness. Dev and QA managers hate each other. People not wanting to lose authority. Non-alignment between leadership. Like just, you know, political turf wars and all this kind of stuff. And I think we see these problems and we talk about them and we complain about them over drinks. But what I want to do in the next, so we have still half an hour. What I want to do in the next half hour is I want you to think about the problem that you have here, and then I want to show you a way to start to map that out and to think about it in the same way that we have, in the same way that we do with our business process analysis or our organization charts, you know. So we have all of these other tools in these other areas, but with politics and culture, we need tools too. And so that's what I want to give you in the next half hour. And as kind of to set your mind, I think at the beginning of this, this has to do with this modeling relation from Robert Rosen. And so we have the world, which is N, natural system. And there are things that happen in the world that cause other things to happen. And so that's the C, the loop in the natural world there. And so you've got all of this going on. And then when we are trying to figure things out about the natural world, this goes back to, I think, Skip's question about ontological and epistemological. So we have this natural world happening here. Then we have some encoding that happens in order to get it into a formal system that happens in our head. So we're gonna build a formal system in the next half hour. We're gonna talk about it. Realize that the formal system only exists in our head. It does not exist in the natural world. And so here we may have what are called entailments or causes happening that happen in the formal system, but that isn't necessarily the exact same thing that happens in the natural world. It's just our model of it. All models are wrong, but some are useful. Then we have the decoding that happens back from our formal system to the natural system. This is what we try to do. So as coaches, as people trying to change things, we are trying to decode, okay, so it looks like this is what's happening in the formal system. Now let's try to influence the natural system. Oh, didn't really work like we thought. I guess there's some difference in our model in our head versus what's really out there in the real world. So that's just kind of where I want to start this. And I'll make references back to this as we talk more. And so Heidi will enter. This is about this into the chat room. This is about the soft systems methodology created by Peter Checkland in England. And he's got a lot of different books on this. Some of them are useful. And so I'll give you a book reference at the end that will help with this, but we also have some of this in our book. So I want to take you through the soft systems methodology. Quickly, we'll take a lightning round through all of this, and then I'll give you some examples from some of the work that we've done. So here the first is that you enter the system, the situation that you consider problematic. So think about what you entered into the chat room. We have people who don't do enough information sharing, let's say. They're hiding information. Then we draw rich pictures, and I'll give you an example of what those look like in a minute. But it's getting people's perspectives of the problem situation. again, going back to that, to the natural system and the formal system. So people's perceptions of problems are in their own formal systems, in their own heads. But that means that 10 people can look at a problem situation and see 10 different problems. Does that sound familiar? So the dev manager sees the QA manager as the problem, and the QA manager sees the dev manager as the problem. Okay, so everybody sees the problem situation differently. So our method of like systems analysis that we tend to use to say, let's figure out what the problem is actually not helpful, because there isn't one. The problems exist in our own heads. They don't exist in the natural system. And so here with the rich pictures, we're trying to get all of these different perspectives on what those problems are and what the situation is. Then out of these rich pictures, we pull themes. And then once we have kind of the general themes from these people's perspectives, we build relevant systems, or we identify relevant systems and create root definitions for those. And I'll give you examples of these in a minute. And then from these relevant systems, we take one or more of these relevant systems and we build a conceptual model. And so if you've ever heard of something called a causal loop diagram, that's one way of doing conceptual models. And there's this lovely dotted line that goes across the middle of the picture here that goes horizontally. This shows the real world versus the world in our heads. And so the real world is up at the top, but then once we go from rich pictures and themes of what people really are talking about, now we're starting to build a conceptual picture of this by identifying relevant systems. We're putting our own worldviews, our own biases into this, and so we have to recognize that. So here we're thinking about the real world. But once we build a conceptual model, we're able to go back into the real world, compare the real world to our model, and then start to make some changes. So this is a bit different way of looking at a problem situation and being able to deal with it. I don't think it's useful for everything, but in those situations with lots of ambiguity and with lots of politics, and we're called, that's where this can be very helpful. Okay, so that's the lightning round. Let me now, let's just look at the rich picture part of this and the themes, and then we'll jump through the rest of it. Okay, so this was the question for one of these sessions that I did with a group. How are we on questions?
There's no additional questions in the chat, but if people have them, feel free to start typing them now.
Yep, anytime. So the question for this particular session, this was with our company, with Pillar Technology. What is your perspective of our company's scaling challenges, and what worries or excites you, and what do you think worries or excites others? Okay, so now it's getting really tricky, because we are, it's not only our own worldview, our worldview of other people's worldviews, but it's important, it's helpful. So this was the question we put in front of people. And then we said, draw a picture. So the drawing aspect of it is actually important, because what we understand is that when you're drawing pictures rather than writing PowerPoint slides, or rather than writing documents, is there's something that bypasses some criticisms in your brain, that it's okay if you're drawing, you're allowed to be kind of like a kid again. And so I have 55 different colored markers, and I just gave them to these people. And these are all like highly paid professionals, these are not children. Well, they just shot up to the board and they just started drawing like it was the best day ever. And this is what I've always experienced happening. People love to draw, even if they're not good at drawing, which you'll see some examples. So I said, just draw the answer to that question. What's your perception of our scaling challenges. And here's what we got. So not a world-renowned artist, but you can see that there are some people on this island at the top. You're just like me. And then there are other people, and the coconut seems to be falling on the person's head here, but there are other people who are just stuck on their own island, and they're not part of the group. So as we scale, their concern was that we'll scale the bigger group and that we'll have these other people kind of get left out as some parts of our company are growing. That was great. Another thing is, so this was a person who was kind of in a, what would you, choke point kind of role. They felt like
Cut out for a second.
Yeah, I was wondering if I was the only one who froze.
Nope.
Yeah, it was a cliffhanger.
Well, we get to think about this drawing. He'll probably come right back. That was a really great drawing, though. Actually, let me share.
Could you read what the words said?
Yeah, just one moment. You know, I have the slides, so I'm going to go. I'm going to go to the slide. Just one moment. I'm going to share my screen.
One of them was like, "Am I getting demoted?" I think, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah. So
I
hang
get
on.
demoted.
I'm going to share my screen too. So here you go. Yeah, did I get demoted? So it's really interesting. Actually, I like this concept of drawing how you see things. And Kristen mentioned clean language to kind of point out where we were not aligned.
right.
Yay, Daryl's back.
You're back. Hi, Daryl. I'm going to stop sharing right now. Thanks. The slides really helped. Or do you want me to actually do you want me to keep sharing actually, and you just tell me when to go? To you.
No, that's okay. I'll see if I can share again.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay, are we seeing
All good.
same slide? Okay. So this is a person kind of in a choke point role, and they felt like they were dealing with a lot of things. And and the person off to the left actually took over thing 4 from this overburdened person. And the only thing the overburdened person could think is just, did I just get demoted? Okay, so this was a reality for them. They were complaining all the time about having too much to do, and then when somebody took something away, they were like, "Wait a minute." So that was, I thought, a great insight. Okay, so DX stands for experience design, and artisan is what we call our software developers, and so Pillar is the name of the company. And so this person, obviously a better artist, they were showing these two fists coming together, saying the designers are, you know, kind of always butting heads with the developers, and in the middle are the delivery folks, like the delivery leadership, that are like, you know, this is, I'm trying to be the referee of all this, but it's really tough. And you see, it's a cufflink that's also a brick wall. So the company started out as a software development company and added the designers afterwards. So the brick wall was really on the side of the artisans. And so that, you know, kind of added complexity to it. Again, just fantastic insights that you get from this. And what else do you get from this that you might not get from a Word document or a PowerPoint? You get emotion. You get emotion, you get perspective. All of these things come out here. You can just feel that poor squeezed, you know, delivery person in the middle of this, whereas that might not come out if I was doing a PowerPoint of this. Talk about emotion. So the organizational structure is able to support us when we're small, but when we get big and when we just pile on these people, I fear the organization structure will crack, and at some point just completely break, and we'll all fall down the cliff. So really, really good insights that we got from those. Those are called rich pictures. And rich pictures can be each person doing their own specific picture, or they could also be if we might all collaborate on one rich picture together. So then we needed to pull some themes from that. And I think you would be able to say, what are some themes from this? As we get bigger, are we going to lose ourselves? You know, that would be a theme. So we pulled some of these themes together in one of the sessions. One thing is doing versus talking. We don't have to name and brand things and include so many people. So there were a whole bunch of different themes that we pulled out of this. I still got 15 more minutes. And so now let's cross that magic line. Let's go into the thinking world, and let's identify some relevant systems and then formulate some root definitions. Okay, so we identified 3 relevant systems. We had an account and so in systems thinking, a system is not necessarily like a business process or something that like the HR system or the project delivery system. We identified systems that no one knew about, no one really had was focused on. One was called the accountability system, connect the dots system, and the execute and disrupt system. So we did not have a vice president of execute and disrupt, but it was a system that was happening over time that we knew that everybody was aware of. And that was that the team was busy, you know, executing, doing our jobs, you know, delivering work for our clients. And then our leadership, and sometimes that was me, would come in and disrupt everything, say, I just got this great new idea of what we should be as a company. Let's do this new thing. And it would be very disruptive to the people trying to execute and trying to keep the lights on. And so these were kind of the 3 systems that we pulled from those. And then we did root definitions of those. And the reason you do root definitions is to make sure that we're all talking about the same system. And so if you go through this exercise, who is the beneficiary of the system? Who are the actors in the system? What transformation is happening in the system? Every system should have these aspects. BAT-WOVE is the name of the acronym. And one thing, if you look a little bit further down, some of these system things are quite familiar. But look at the V. Who are the victims of the system? Okay, so who are the victims of this system if this system is working well? That's actually the qualification here. So if we've got this system, you know, that's happening in a consulting firm, and the system is working perfectly. Let's say we're selling into the marketplace. Who are the victims of that system? The victims of the system of this consulting firm selling well into the marketplace are its competitors. Okay, so you're looking for who the victims are if this system is working well. We've got lots of other stuff we could talk about here, but this is a way to make sure we're talking about the same system. Okay, so now we've got a system. We actually picked one of the systems and we built a conceptual model of this system. This is the, I won't say it's the hardest step. It's a very detailed step, let's say that. It takes time. And that's because these conceptual models are kind of like big monsters. It's going to be hard to read this. But this is called a causal loop diagram. And you can see the tool that I was using called Plectica, but there are lots of causal loop diagramming software applications. My favorite free one is called Insight Maker. And it's a web-based tool. It's actually very functional, and it's really good to use. But the idea is that we're showing cause and effect. So if there is a line between two, and you can't see the arrowheads very well here, but if there's a line from here, so teams are literate in all of our domains, craftsmanship, DX, delivery, that is causal to team members adapting our practices in context of all the domains, okay? And so we created this gigantic diagram here with all these different causes and effects. And there's one that's kind of in the middle here of this whole diagram. It's just kind of like everything seemed to want to link to it. And that was, surprise, surprise, team members are happy with their work. So if we can, when we build these causal loop diagrams, and this is basically like, you know, a whole like week of training to get into this. But if we build these causal loop diagrams, we can do things like look for leverage points where we can say, if we just change this one a little bit, that could have all of these good effects to these other boxes, and we could really do something good here. So that's as much as I want to talk about this diagram. I'm sure there are millions of questions that you have in your head, but I'm going to refer you to a book at the end that can kind of give you some instruction here. And Insight Maker, actually, there are tons of tutorials for that on YouTube from Gene Bellinger. He was kind of the person who drove the creation of that free tool. So yeah, Insight Maker, you can really learn a lot there. Okay, so this was our execute and disrupt system. I forgot to mention that. So this was not a system that anybody formally knew about, that it was existing, but once we identified it, people nodded their heads and they said, yeah, I know exactly, and I know where I fit, and this is how it's helping me, and this is how it's hurting me. Okay, so that's our conceptual model. So then we went on to compare that model against the real world, and then see if we could make some changes. So here were the results that we encountered. All of that work was the result of 5 two-hour sessions with the stakeholders in this company. And this, remember, the original question was, how do we scale? How do we get bigger without losing ourselves? So a few of the things that we did, we started surveying people to find out what are the cool projects, like what makes you happy with your work? What are the engagements that really get you excited? And also thin slicing our disruptions. So we looked into, if rather than saying we're going to make this really big organizational change or this change in branding, is there a way that we could roll it out in smaller pieces that wouldn't be so disruptive? Cross-literacy, cross-domain literacy. So can the DX people learn more about being an artisan? Can the artisans learn more about being DX? That turned out to be very, very helpful. And then coaching skills for those delivery folks. What would it take for you to stay at this company if you're thinking about leaving, and making sure that our delivery leads, who sometimes were the corporate representative on the spot, that they would really have those skills to deal with those situations. And then trying to make those changes one at a time, trying not to be too disruptive. And then, of course, you know, our question is all about scaling. And we got bought by a 500,000 person company. So that question really turned into a whole different question, which was, how do we maintain ourselves being in this much larger company? And we've been asking and answering that question ever since. So here's the book recommendation I promised. Whoops, my Zoom is right over that book. Learning for Action from Peter Checkland. It's not available as Kindle, unfortunately, but there are softcover versions of it on Amazon. But that is the book that I'd recommend. So Checkland's written probably 10 or 15 books. Most of it's not good. So he's a good academic. He's a good practitioner, actually. But book writing is not his forte. So Learning for Action is the best one. I think he must have had some help. And it's a short book, and it can kind of take you through these things that we've been talking about with the soft systems methodology. Soft systems methodology is one of the things we mention in our book, but you know, we talk about dealing with, you know, enterprise architecture. We talk about dealing with PMOs. We talk about dealing with offshore. We talk about dealing with kind of all of those groups that are not, you know, they are not trying to stop anything good. They're just trying to do their work as the Agile transformation is happening. And so we have some strategies in there to kind of turn things into a win-win, so that enterprise architects can fulfill their objectives and the Agile teams can fulfill their objectives. But really, that's what our book is about. And today I was wanting to give you a tool that might be useful for you as you're doing your work in coaching Agile journeys. We got journeys in both places, so I think that's, you know, that's a win right there.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Daryl. Anyone have questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or type it in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself. One thing resonated with me, what Daryl said, is everyone's just trying to do their work.
Yeah. It's not, in our experience, it hasn't been, you know, people are trying to stop an Agile transformation. It's that they're trying to get their objectives done, and sometimes those things are in conflict, in direct conflict with what we're trying to do with the Agile systems thinking. Fifth Discipline, yes, that is a very good book, and it will give you a lot of guidance with the causal loops, so that's useful. What I find with Sengi's causal loops is that I feel like he doesn't get enough into the emotional side of things. So that would be my only caution there. But yeah, that's it. That's a great book.
Awesome. So our the recording will be posted on our website, coachingagilejourneys.com, and the slides, Daryl, I can PDF those if you don't mind and put them up there as well. People have been asking for those.
Yeah.
Any last questions, anybody? I really enjoyed this. It was very informative.
I got one here. I got one question. Hi, my name is Sam. So I'm not sure to what extent he talked about this process to be daily part. It's ingrained in the daily work instead of one periodic transformation. No, it's daily transformation. It's happening always.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever gotten that far with an organization. So for me, it's a tool that I use as a consultant when I see those problem situations that are highly political and are power-based. And so I kind of pull it out of my own toolbox to use it. But I've never, even in my own organization, like I don't think I have a group of 50 other people that would automatically go to this tool. But that's a great point. Something like this should be part of the everyday work of all of us, that when we encounter these things, this is the tool that we go to. But I haven't been that lucky.
Yeah, so instead of waiting till the problem becomes bigger and they require this extensive analysis, maybe it will require a smaller amount of analysis if we do it in
incremental, really. Yeah, I love that.
Awesome. So we just have a few seconds left, and I just wanted to share that for April, on April 20th, Christy Urbeck will come and speak to us about Dare to Lead, and she's a certified Dare to Lead facilitator. Keep your eyes out for the Eventbrite. It's going to be up very, very shortly, and hope you can join that. Please feel free to ping any of us co-hosts. Reach out to us on coachingagilejourneys.com. Daryl, you've got his information on Twitter and email. And yeah, thanks so much for showing up today. Super appreciate your time. And Daryl, thanks again for spending this hour with our community.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great group.
Awesome. Have a
Thank
lovely
you.
day. Thanks.
you.